Welcome back to On the Light. In this episode, I talk with Marla Apt about her journey into Iyengar Yoga. Inspired by her mother and shaped by her college studies in Buddhist philosophy, Marla found her way to the Iyengar Yoga Institute of Los Angeles and eventually to Pune to study with Guruji, Geeta ji, and Prashant ji. She shares vivid stories of those experiences, Guruji's precise adjustments, Geeta's compassionate guidance, and the generosity of the entire Iyengar family. We also discuss her work in yoga therapy research and the development of Iyengar Yoga therapeutics. It's a rich conversation about the transformative power of this practice and the legacy we're all connected to. Please enjoy this episode of On the Light. Hi, Marla. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for meeting with me.
Of course.
I always like to start by asking people what brought you to Iyengar Yoga.
Mm. Well, I had first tried other kinds of yoga when
Mm-hmm.
I was in college at the time, and in college I was studying Buddhist philosophy.
Okay.
And my college offered, there were yoga classes available, and I tried a few. And I enjoyed it, but it didn't really strike me as anything other than physical exercise, stretching. And I remember when I came home to visit my parents for the summer, I
Mm-hmm.
introduced my mother. I thought she might like yoga. So I was like, oh, let's go try a yoga class. And I found the least expensive one in town. And we did that for a few weeks. And, uh, and then I left and I went back to school and she kept doing yoga. And she told me one day that she had tried a different kind of yoga through her local adult school and that it was very different. And when I come back, I should try it. So, one of the times when I was back home visiting, I went to one of her classes, and that was an Iyengar yoga class. And, as I had been studying the philosophy, so that was my interest, I, for the first time, saw that this practice was actually connected to the philosophy. I had been a little bit exposed to yoga philosophy in my studies. So I was really intrigued. I was like, okay, this isn't just some stretching class. This is actually connected to the system and the school of of yogic thought and philosophy. Um, so that intrigued me, and because my practices and my studies were all about meditative practices, I thought, oh, this is so practical. This is something that's really that can be understood by everybody, because some of the practices that I was studying seemed very obscure and perhaps not for the average practitioner. So anyway, I was intrigued by that, and I knew that this was something actually worth studying. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I have my mother to thank. And then when I came,
Yeah, that's really cool.
yeah, she then bought me as a birthday gift a gift certificate to the Iyengar Yoga Institute of LA, and then I just started
Oh.
going. I maximized that certificate and went every day, and sometimes multiple times a day. And I was like, I just need to learn this subject.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I really love that your mom was the one that introduced you to that. It's pretty special.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
So then when did you start going to Pune? Like how did it progress to you studying in India?
So I was studying in LA intensively, and I was young. I was in my early 20s, and because as I had already had this, I already had been studying Buddhism. I understood the importance of lineage, and so
Mm-hmm.
learning that the guru was alive, the master who created this method and was behind all these teachings was still alive. I immediately knew, I need to study with the source.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it was like a 3-year long waiting list, and there were prerequisites, and I was pretty much a total beginner. So I just tried to absorb everything I could. I was encouraged by teachers that they were just starting a teacher training program in LA, the first one, and when my teachers encouraged me to try that because it was called for teachers and serious students,
Uh-huh.
I have no interest in teaching, but okay, I want to learn more about this, the underlying principles, so I'll do that. And then, but it was a 3 year long program. Even that, I didn't feel like, oh, I'm gonna stick around for 3 years for that. So I just, they actually saw that, I was young and 3 years is a long time in the life of somebody in their early 20s. And I said, I want to go to India and I'm just going to go. So they let me complete that in 2 years. And I just, upon completion of that, I went to Pune. I just showed up, I didn't have the reservation and I didn't have a return ticket. So I just showed up and asked, can I stay? I remember, I was sent to Geeta to talk to her and she's, how long are you staying for? And I was like, I don't know. As long as I can I stay for a year? And she said, if we say no, where are you gonna go? And I was like, I don't know. Maybe I'll go back up to the north. I had already been to India before for my other studies. So she's like, okay, well, come take my class tonight and then we'll see. So I ended up staying for a year for that first.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. That was a kind of pivotal experience for my yoga journey, my Iyengar yoga journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm. Do you have any memories from that year of experiences with Guruji or Geeta or Prashant?
Yeah. Well, it was
I have a lot.
a lot. I mean, the interesting thing was it was because being there for a year, I got to kind of be a part of the daily rhythm of things and the weekly
Yeah.
rhythm and then the monthly rhythm. And I appreciated that and that I got to see how things change throughout the year, month by month.
Uh-huh.
Every month a new group of students, so there was a different, focus based on who was there. The people who were staying longer weren't taking class every day. I think we were given only 3 classes for the more local students, 3 classes a week, and then the rest of the time we were assisting. So every day I was at the institute
Oh,
and I was assisting Geeta ji and Prashant ji. So that was an amazing experience because I got to just be I was fresh and I mean, fresh in the sense that I really was a kind of a beginner. I didn't really have many imprints and I had taught a few classes, but wasn't really a teacher. So I was just got to like watch and see what they were doing and copy that and be their extra set of hands. And so everything that they were teaching was imprinted on me and I was seeing the students kind of through that lens. So assisting was really an incredible experience for me. Guruji, he was as everybody as I mean he was extremely impressive and he was also so grand. I mean he was people say he was short but I never experienced that. He just seems so huge, his presence, but so kind and always teaching. So let me just think of an experience with him. Or with Geeta, one of the first things I'll just say, because this was a theme throughout the years of Geeta, was that you have to be of help, you have to be of service. And I remember my first week there, I went to watch the medical class. And I went out, they had the balconies at the time. I sat out on the balcony, I had my notepad, and I'm gonna watch this thing happening. And
mhm.
she looked at me pretty early on in the class and she said, are you just gonna sit there or are you gonna help? And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. So, but that was a pretty clear statement. And that kind of kept repeating itself that, look around, even when I was a student in the class, if there's somebody next to me who needs help, she would just yell at me and be like, Marla, look next to you. She needs help her up into handstand and I was kind of very much in my shell of like, I'm a student here. I'm not, even when I was not assisting, I thought I'm just a student, but that was her message is just, when you see, and that was how she taught. She didn't leave anybody behind. And so just to have that viewpoint is look who needs help here and be of service. Guruji, I'll just say, I mean, there's so many memories, but in the beginning, I really didn't, I just saw him. I didn't interact with him, except, and then a few months after I'd been there, I went to Rishikesh. He taught an intensive in Rishikesh, and he at the first day, he asked me to demonstrate on the stage, and he wanted us to give each other adjustments. And so he adjusted me. I couldn't see it. I was doing, I think, Viparita Dandasana over the stage, and he just put his hands on my thighs. It was probably a very simple adjustment, but when he adjusted me, all this movement happened in my spine. It was I was completely surprised by it. I had done this pose many times before, but it was an adjustment that affected me all the way to my head. And
Wow.
and then without me seeing him, because my head was back, then somebody else took over, and then I felt hands. I felt the physical adjustment. But when it was him, I couldn't even feel what was touching me. I didn't know, what was actually happening. I just felt my whole spine was being impacted by it. So his touch really impressed me from the very beginning. The other thing I'll just say about him is that I also was so impressed with how relaxed he was when he
Mhm.
wasn't in yoga class. I mean, when he was teaching, he was extremely focused he was always present. But when he was relaxing or, enjoying entertainment or socializing, he was so relaxed. And that
Mhm.
impressed me that he really, was very relaxed in himself and relaxed around other people. And
Mhm.
that's kind of a rare quality. Physically in his body too, so relaxed.
How about anything with Prashant that you
Hmm.
want to share?
So yeah, I was also assisting Prashant's classes, but at that time, we were given the women were given the ladies' classes, or I mean, I can't
Mhm.
remember my exact schedule, but so we had less. The women had less classes with Prashant, but I was able to assist him
Mhm.
at that time. He had assistants in his classes, so yeah, he was Prashant. He kind of I guess what I was always intimidated, I'd have to say, by Prashant because he was first of all, he was all very serious and he demanded that. I mean, Geeta, Guruji, they all demanded it in their own way, our seriousness. Obviously, there could be
Yeah.
no casual approach. But sometimes, you thought that because his classes had a kind of different open format to them, that
Mhm.
people oftentimes thought, oh, well, there's something, kind of casual about this. And then no, when he
Yeah.
saw that, he was very clear, we're really engaged here.
Can I just stop and ask you, what
Yeah.
year was this that
Oh,
you
yeah,
were?
that was 95, 96.
That's pretty early.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I felt like I was dropping into something late because all my teachers, all the senior teachers, they had already
Sure.
been for so long. But,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Prashant was always so approachable, always still is so approachable. I mean, he
Yeah.
offers himself for, anybody can stop and ask him questions. And I've just always felt like, well, who am I to ask anything? His knowledge is
Mhm.
vast. I mean,
Yeah.
it still blows me away. I mean,
Me too.
right? He can just quote all these texts they're just all there at his fingertips, so much
They're
knowledge.
all just in him. Yeah, it's really amazing.
He's giving so much now. I mean, his generosity in especially in the last few years, of course, he feels he's just giving so much. And that was always my my experience of Gita, that she was just
Mhm.
giving all the time. I mean, that was, I think, to me, that was like her lesson, to all of us, that she didn't hold back at all. She
Mhm.
In her classes. She was completely involved, and she, like I said, wanted to help everybody. If somebody was not catching it or lagging behind or had some injury, they couldn't. She wanted to bring them up, and even if she had to stop everything else that was happening, and then to see, her when her last teaching, how she taught basically until her death. She gave everything, every ounce of herself, her life force. She gave her prana. She was there on that stage teaching hundreds of people
Mhm.
when she would have been in her deathbed. You don't, that's not how you associate somebody days before their death. Uh,
Right.
but no, she obviously wasn't well, and yet she was giving every last ounce of her prana, her knowledge, her life force into us. And that was an example of this life of service. It was really unbelievable.
Did you have any experiences with them in the family outside of the practice hall?
Yes, at family gatherings, social functions, even, I was lucky to travel with the family, with some of the family members and Guruji and family
Hmm.
weddings type of things. One time when we were in Pune and Guruji was receiving, no, this wasn't, it was a different time. Yeah, also he received awards that we got to go to. All the students would go for that, but there was a well-known Indian classical vocalist, Pandit Jasraj, was in town performing, and he invited us to come with him and go to this
Oh.
concert. And we sat up in the front, and the concert started very late and it went very late. And by the time we all got home, it was, I think, past midnight. It had been a wonderful evening, but I was sure that, okay, we had a late night. Tomorrow is going to be different. We get to sleep in and practice. We'll start late tomorrow. But sure enough, Guruji was there right at 9 a.m. when the practice hall opened. I mean, there was nothing shook him from his practice. He was these external circumstances did not impede his devotion.
Hmm. Hmm.
And other times also he came to LA. He came in 2005. I was helping to organize some of that Light on Life tour, and he did come to Los Angeles, and so we had a dinner one night, and I was asking him some questions before dinner about some research I was doing, and I wanted to get his advice on working with anxiety. And he was talking about it before dinner, and he was asking me to do some asanas to experience what he was talking about. And then we had dinner. He was quiet during dinner. It was a whole group of us. And immediately after dinner, he just started exactly where he had left off before dinner. I mean, it was like his mind was never not on the subject. And he's like, Marla, do Urdhva Dhanurasana. We had just had dinner.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he just continued the teaching. Um, so I did kind of learn that when you're around him, you kind of have to be prepared at any moment to do asana in the library. We would just be, sitting around, but he'd start talking about something. We'd go, oh, hey, stand on your head, do shirshasana, and start teaching. So yeah, his mind was kind of always there on his subject. He was,
Mm-hmm.
that's what, as he called it, his subject, yoga. Yeah.
Wow. Were you asking about anxiety like in general for students, or was it more specific for yourself?
It was for a study. I was doing research
Oh.
through the university, the Neuropsychiatric Institute. We were with a doctor. We had done a research study on yoga for depression. And
Oh.
basically, I used to consult with them about everything. If I was asked to write an article about something for relief of a certain symptom or something, before I would publish it, I would send it to Geeta ji or Guruji and ask, is this okay? And
Mhm.
I change something in the sequence or something. So anyway, for the study, of course, I wanted it to be as effective as possible. So we sent the sequences to Guruji, and he approved them. And maybe he gave us some hints about how to work with the students in depression. So after that study, then there was some funding for another study on yoga for anxiety. So then I asked him, I told him about the results of the depression study, and that's what I was asking him about. How here are our sequences that we've come up for the anxiety study. Could you please advise? And then he started the whole thing by just saying, oh, it's exactly the same as depression. Except one thing. And the one thing was how the eyes had to work. But then that was the beginning of the conversation. And then it went on. And then he started, but now do this, do Urdhva Dhanurasana, try this asana, do the standing poses. And so he showed how similar, but how the approach is very different with anxiety and how the things that
Mhm.
we had to pay attention to. So that was the purpose of that conversation.
Mhm. I see. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing was ever, it was in a way his teaching was, there was simplicity to it, but it was never simple. It was,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, his observation skills. I mean, just to have observed, these small things about the direction that the eyes move, the skin on the outer corner of the eye, the difference between that in anxiety and depression. It was just, he understood himself and the body so much that when he saw other people, he understood. I mean, I remember times when, he'd see people walk in from the other side of the room. He'd be on one side of the far end of the yoga hall, and you'd see somebody walk in the door, and he would know exactly what was going on with them. One time he had us, I remember we were standing in a circle. I don't know, I think there was a doctor there conducting some experiments, and Guruji was able to tell all of us exactly what our blood pressure was. I think this doctor was taking our blood pressure, and he was able to just look, and everybody's like, oh, it's like magic. He knew the numbers of our blood pressure before the doctor measured it, and he's like, no, it's easy. You just look at the eyes and the forehead and the eyebrows, and he was able. They're just so just his level of observation was
Mhm.
so great. I mean, the things that he saw in the medical class, I mean, assisting with him and Geeta in the medical class was incredible what he saw, how, every little inch made a difference. And he would say to can't you see? Like, can't you see this is all wrong? And, one thing was just, a few inches off, and then he would change it and the whole thing would change. So, sometimes things were completely off, but I mean, yeah, he could see what was going on for people and what they needed. And even in photos, people would send him photos of themselves for for advice, and he could, detect small things in those photos. So, yeah.
Wow. Was there a certain point when you became particularly interested in therapeutics?
I mean, I guess it was just kind of it was just part of the whole picture for me, because like I said, being there in Pune, they had that medical class, and I was thrust into helping in it, and that was just what all the teachers did. So it was so it just seemed like it was part of the method, was, this
Mhm.
real aspect, and helping people. And then, as I mentioned, doing those studies, I was approached by a student researcher to do those studies, and then after completing those studies and seeing how effective the practice is, I mean, I saw that, of course, in the
Mhm.
medical class, but that was all one-on-one, and then seeing it in this kind of group setting that we could have measurable results, that made me interested in, well, how do we make this available to people who have conditions, who have these that would not otherwise find yoga or
Mhm.
Iyengar yoga. There are those of us who just, had this whatever karma led us to go to India, or, to discover to Iyengar yoga, and then we went along the path, and at some point we have some injury, and we find out it helps us with that injury. But what
Right.
about people who are not interested in being a yoga student? And they have depression, or they have a heart condition, and how are they ever going to find this? So that's when I became interested in, oh, we really need to develop this and make it available. I think in India, at the medical in Pune, at least the medical class there, it's kind of known that, this is a resource for people. It's kind of like a clinic for a lot of people who have never done yoga. They come to that to help them with their condition, but there hadn't been something like that here. So that was then I kind of got interested to kind of formalize it as an organization. That's what when I started the nonprofit organization Iyengar Yoga Therapeutics, was to
Mhm.
have a or more some place where we could just focus on
Yeah.
therapy.
And that is a great resource.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's
Yeah.
work in progress.
And then did you mention that you also have something going on at the LA Institute there?
We did have our own version of the medical class. This was both prior to the pandemic, though. The
Okay.
institute, unfortunately, it had to close at the very
Uh,
beginning of the pandemic. I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, fortunate that they didn't have to pay rent for a year and a half. That while there was a lockdown and no yoga studios could be open. But anyway, because of that, we didn't have a studio for 5 years, almost 5 years. So anyway, that was, but we did prior to that, we had a therapy class, and it was run in a similar manner to the medical class in Pune. We had many each student was doing their own individualized sequence, and we had assistants, many teachers involved in helping with that.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was a great resource. I hope we can build something like that again,
Hmm.
because there are many people who just that's what the therapy class is for people who cannot participate in a general yoga class. They need a more targeted approach. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I feel that's a resource that's needed for
Definitely.
community.
Hmm. I know that you have a great body of work. I mean, all of this work that you've done around therapy. I know you've written dozens of articles, right? I remember seeing them when I first came into yoga, and I would see your name in Yoga Journal and Yoga Rahasya as well, right?
I think there is something there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I was doing some writing. And for the newsletters, we had used to have a local association newsletter, and of course there's a national association newsletter.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't written anything in a while, but the subject hasn't struck up yet. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I was just asked to write, so I did.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So did you continue to go to Pune then every year after that first time in 95?
Yeah, yeah, I went every year, sometimes twice a year. So yeah, I did return, except for, I think 2020 and 2020, and obviously 21, I didn't go. But yeah, I've been returning every year. So, or when Guruji would leave India, I would try to be there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like when he went to Europe or China. Same with Geeta ji when she left the country. A few times I got to go study with her. Or obviously when she came to the US. So
Mhm.
yeah, just trying to grab those opportunities when they were there. But yes, returning, never returned for a year again, although there's something very special about the long stay.
Mhm. That's really incredible, Marla. It's like you kind of grew up with
Mm.
this because if you're in your early 20s, I mean, that's really amazing and fortunate for you that you did fall into it so young and you had that whatever it was inside of you that told you to go to India to study and I mean, it's pretty incredible.
I felt like after that year, I still wasn't convinced I was going to be a yoga teacher, but I knew I had been given so much and I had to share it. I had to, share what I
Mhm.
had learned. That was kind of the, implied message from the Iyengars was, you have to teach what you've learned. Geeta, they were very generous. Geeta would show in medical class, how to touch and how to give an adjustment. And, she's, they had an expectation that this knowledge was going to be passed on. I went for totally selfish reasons, but then I just was so hooked on it. And um,
Mhm.
I never really, yeah, I don't, yeah, it just kept going. And I kept studying and I wanted to study more. And then to help support the habit of studying, I had to teach. And um,
Mhm.
it just, but yes, you're right. It was super formative. I mean, when I look back at my notes from that year, I like some of the things I wrote down, especially at the very beginning, that started to trail off after a while. But I was like, why did I write that down? Because those are all the things that are just in me now. They're all the things that, I just know. They're just, that's part of my vocabulary. But so I think a lot seeped into me. And of course, yeah, I feel lucky that I was able to um, have that with such qualified teachers so that I know when I'm teaching that the words that are coming out that they're coming from a good source.
What did you notice since you did go for so many years in a row for so long about sort of the arc of Guruji's practice?
I guess I wasn't noticing marking the changes, to be honest, but definitely the quality of staying in the asanas, his capacity to stay. Uh, I was noticing that more and more, and it might have been there in the beginning, but it just I was always just blown away by how there was presence everywhere in his asana, how, every part of his body, and he could stay there, and it looked from the outside that he was just being still. But if you watch closely, you could just see that there was presence, awareness in each and every part, this was his teaching, that we had to spread our awareness to each and every part of the body, but you could see that exhibited in his practice. And at first I thought that's how I'm supposed to be practicing. I'm just supposed to, everything is supposed to just strike at the same time. And well, uh, as a beginner, it's just not possible. And but he told me at one point, advising me on my own practice, he said, you have to approach your practice like reading a book. Read one page and then the next page and then the next page. You have to do one thing at a time. And I was like, oh, I thought I was supposed to do everything at once. It was like, no, you only once you get to the end of the book. I mean, he didn't say that part, but that was implied. Only once you get to the end of the book can you kind of bring it all together. But in the process of, for me, my ignorance of just thinking, oh, I'm gonna, kind of pose everything at once. In that process, nothing was awake and alert, had been fully expressed or penetrated. So yeah, just like, really going methodically. And that was another thing that he could just see people where they were. He could see people where they needed to be and what they needed as their approach and as it changed. And that was, how he approached me, and saw my change that even when I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time that he scolded me was in medical class, and I had put a blanket it was actually just a few inches in the wrong place, but it made a huge difference in the pose. And he was scolding me and he said, "You're a beginner." And this was my on my first trip. And then years later, he scolded me for using a prop for myself in my practice. He's like, "You're a senior teacher." He's like, "Why?" He's like, "Why are you?" I was like, "No, no, no. Remember, I'm a beginner." But anyway, that was you asked me about the seeing the change in his own practice, and I mean there was always an intensity. So I don't think I really registered that. Oh, his practice is changing. Obviously, now when I look back at it, when he was in the later years of his life, he was holding those asanas for so long that he just made it look effortless. Sometimes we would try the exact setup. He had just done Kapotasana on the chair for who knows how many minutes. I wasn't timing it, but a long time. And he made it look so peaceful that he could stay there. And then we would try it afterwards. And, happy if I could stay there for 3 minutes. It was so intense. And
Uh-huh.
that intensity of it didn't show on him. There was such absorption. So I think, I was seeing that absorption in his practice. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you saw that when he was there practicing. He was so generous also that he was watching us and helping us, while he was practicing. So
My first time there, I went in July, so I was there for Guru Purnima, and he did a talk. And I'm sure you've heard many of those talks. And I just remember, we all sat and listened to him. And then when we went out, there was kind of that receiving line where everyone was able to pay their respects, and then they had like some cookies or something for us out there. It really struck me how, like you said, kind and relaxed he was with all of that, and interacting with everybody. It was really special.
yeah,
Hmm.
he was so sociable and so, able to fit into so many situations. I mean, I saw him at parties and in those, when he, like you just said, at the Guru Purnima, at those events there at the Institute, and how the role of the teacher would turn into being the role of the host. And so Guruji
Hmm.
was the host, and, we had to eat first before him or the family would eat. We were guests in their house and treating us with that kind of, and it's still to this day the same way, is treating us with that respect of receiving a guest as if they're, if the guests themselves are divine when, they are actually the teachers, but that,
Hmm.
that, so his ease in those situations, saw him at parties and he would just laugh and he would like to tell jokes, and you'd see him in his house. He was never hiding from us. He was there in his house. We could see right in walking in and out of the Institute the way it used to, the doorway used to walk past right his house, so we could see him sitting on the floor watching TV, watching cricket. He'd be totally absorbed in watching cricket, watching the news, and how relaxed he was. Even I remember like a Guru Purnima or, some events in the hall there where he was in the audience and he would sit on the
Mm-hmm.
floor and he wasn't trying to sit up straight and, in a yoga asana. He was relaxed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot to learn and just seeing how he held himself in life. And it's always so kind and sweet, the persona of the teacher that at times is so intense and fiery. That was definitely a teaching tool. That was not his like a general personality thing. So that was
Mm-hmm.
helpful to see that, like, oh, this is a methodology for
Mm-hmm.
how to convey the teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Because he'd be very fierce sometimes in his teaching, and then he'd turn around and laugh and be like,
Yeah.
"Wait, oh, I thought you were actually like caught up in it emotionally." It's like, no, he was just putting that on for the effect, to get us to engage ourselves, to be alert and awake. But then, then he would turn around and laugh.
Are there any other stories that you were thinking about that you wanted to share? I
Um,
just love how people have these experiences with them and they're so, I don't know, just like sweet to hear about.
I myself just always felt I was always in awe of him. So I even, even in kind of relaxed situations, I just wanted to be in his presence. I just wanted to be around,
Mhm.
to enjoy his presence. And it was very enjoyable. There was one time when we were touring Belur, and there was inauguration of the Patanjali temple. And so he invited everybody to come, and then they had a tour of temples after that, and we ended up, it was a little pilgrimage to visit temples and some of the sites in Karnataka, and then we ended up in Mysore. We were sharing meals together in throughout this little tour, and we sat out one meal, we were sitting out and eating off a banana leaf and eating with our hands, and I was sitting next to him and or near him across the table, I think from him, and or across the path from him, and he started in teaching me how to properly eat with my fingers with my hands, 'cause, how to just the specificity and that he could articulate. Nobody had articulated to me, how to curl the fingers properly and which part of the finger was touching the food, and
Uh-huh.
with the same kind of observation skills of his teaching of asana. I mean, of course, it was playful and fun, but still, it was like, okay, the teacher was always there, and
Mhm. Oh my gosh, I love that.
yeah, and Geeta too. I mean, and she was so kind and generous. I mean, she was such a big presence for me, person. She was
Mhm.
there, teaching obviously when he wasn't formally teaching at that time. So, she was there teaching day in and day out, and she was just always so concerned for our well-being. She really was just concerned about everybody, all our students, and wanted us to be well off, and not just in our, physical bodies and in our practice, but also in our life. That was, I saw that side of them too, when I had my own struggles at different times and things that I needed help with, and then how caring and kind and saw that side of how they treated the patients in the medical class. Because if you watch them in the medical class, they were so caring and constantly communicating with the patient. They call them patients, the students in
Mhm.
the class, but
Mhm.
and it's communicative and gentle, and I mean treated different people different ways according to the student's capacity, but
Mhm.
I got to see that side of them too when I was having my own whatever issues it was that I needed to work on, and how there was just this like seeing that lens of that level of teaching was really, it's like a caretaking in a way, and I felt
Mhm.
so held and so cared for, and then just discovering how yoga can help with things that I never even thought it could help with. So
Mhm.
it's always been a discovery, I think. Just, oh, it
Mhm.
helps with that too.
Yeah. Well, it's like never ending
You
for
really,
me at least. It's
yeah, it is.
discovery. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things in Iyengar Yoga, that we're all seekers, right? Because we get to be
Mhm.
students forever. There's just so much,
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
vastness, so much to learn.
What advice would you give to people, younger teachers coming up? how to keep Guruji's legacy. Of course, they won't have the experience of being able to learn from him or be around him, but to keep his legacy in the forefront.
Hmm. Keep studying and keep practicing.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm sure everybody says just keep practicing, but I mean practicing with guidance, with with the studying with whoever your teachers are. I mean, if there's we have the institute in Pune, so there are teachers that I recommend connecting with them, even if it's not, even if you can't go for a month, you can study with them online, or you can go for Yoganu Shasanam, or Abhijata's coming to the US for a convention, there are opportunities. So stay connected to the lineage and read Guruji's books. There's so much. He gave so much, actually.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, that was sometimes the frustration is that I saw there, people would ask questions that had already been answered. Now it's not that we could always have been there to know that they were answered, but it was that so much was given in writing and in videos and talks. So there's a lot out there, there are many resources for us. So mine those resources.
Mhm.
Ashtadala Yoga Mala, that volume, 8 volumes, is so many articles in there. So there's a lot to learn still, and Guruji's teachings are not static, and there's and even rereading his books, I always see new things in them. So yes, I appreciate that you read passages from his books. There's just a new
Mm.
way to see it, but yeah, staying connected to his teaching, because it was so multifaceted, and we can get caught in the points, the actions, the doing, as Prashant says, but
Mhm.
but the depth was always there. And so the multifaceted quality of it, and then grounding that in your practice and discovering, how all of those aspects are to be discovered in our practice, and they're not something separate. I mean, Guruji discovered all of that through
Mhm.
asana pranayama practice. It wasn't that he
Mhm.
sat in a library and read those books and
Right.
learned as a scholar. So following that technique and the teachings, and then expanding your view to know that this straightening the arm is not the end goal here, that it's to lead us to something.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I like that you said mine those resources. That's a good way to look at it because there are so many from all of them. I mean, yeah.
Now Prashant is giving us so much. There's yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
endless where our studies can go.
Hmm. Hmm.
Keep being a student, have that, as Geeta used to say, that innocence of being a student, even for the teachers, that we first and foremost remain practitioners and students.
Hmm.
That innocence isn't lost, to discover. And that was Guruji's, also his message was in 2005. I think you were there in Light on Life tour, and
Yeah.
his message, and he gave talks and in Estes Park and then around the country, and he was encouraging us to just continue practicing. And he said, you don't know what's going to come out of it, and don't
Hmm.
set goals, because that's limiting. That's what could get what we could receive, the gifts we can receive from our practice are completely unknown to us. So be open to it. And
Hmm.
he told his own story of practice and said that there were times when he had long plateaus in his practice. I think he even mentioned a decade long plateau. And he kept
Hmm.
showing up every day and practicing. And then just said spontaneously something new came to him. So we don't know when that's going to happen. So not to practice in this transactional way, or, expecting, some kind of immediate result, because in the beginning, of course, it's very exciting. There are all kinds of improvements and changes, and
Yeah.
but at some point it's not going to be this external achievement. And so just continuing and to pay attention, to be present, to see what arises, what changes. I personally just remember those words of, encouraging us that even when you feel nothing is improving or changing, or nothing is coming to you, as he used to say, then you just keep doing it, and something will come to you, and you don't know when it's going to happen. So
Hmm. I love that.
yeah.
That's great. Well, Marla, thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for listening to this episode of On the Light. One of the parts of this interview that I found particularly touching was when she was speaking of Geetaji's devotion and dedication that lasted all the way up to the end of her incredible life. There's an article in Yoga Rahasya, Volume 30, Number 4 from 2024, which is titled Devotion, and it's written by Geetaji. It's an incredible article that I encourage all listeners to listen to from start to finish. I'm going to read this passage from page 32 of the issue. And she's speaking of Patanjali when she writes, "But he knows Ishvara Pranidhana is not that easy. If the concept of God is unknown, if you do not know what God is, then how can you surrender? If I say, now all of you are going to surrender yourself to God, you will ask, please tell us, what is God? Otherwise, how can you have devotion and dedication to an unknown object or an unknown entity?" So Patanjali says, first follow the whole process of yoga methodically. In following the process, you develop devotion. Your intelligence reaches the state of maturity. Then you don't need any efforts, as Ishvara Pranidhana naturally happens. You surrender to the Lord without any effort. You do not even doubt the existence of God. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Namaskar.